Welcome back to the channel of Truth, Trust, and Transparency. Today, I'm answering another one of your YouTube questions. David Chen has written in with quite a lovely question, and I thought, why not record a video on it? He's posted this one 6 hours ago. David, really respect it. I'm getting onto it as well. This is what he says. Hi, Davey. Many thanks for sharing your personal property development experience through your videos. Your channel is, in my view, the most genuine and practical channel on YouTube when it comes to explaining property development in Australia. Huge compliment. I really appreciate it. You've truly embodied truth, trust, and transparency through your actions, which I believe is exactly the purpose you set out to build your channel upon. Works out. From this video, you mentioned that not knowing the numbers is one of the biggest mistakes new developers make. Would you consider making a video that explains construction costs in more details? I can. Since different markets require different structural types, interior standards, and design styles at the planning and design stages of a project. Question number one, how do variations impact the overall construction cost? I'm going to answer this one first. Now, variations occur, and I had if you want David or anyone listening to this, I could probably link it up on YouTube. I'm not too, technical with YouTube, but I can probably link it up here. I've had multiple interviews with a lot of people around construction pricing, and especially with QS, especially some contracts specialists. Variations, or varies as they're called, whatever you want to call them, typically come in when there are changes to the plans. Two reasons. Changes to the plans, not enough detail. Two reasons. Not enough detail. Variations come in almost always because of one of the two things. So I think, your question was, how do variations impact the overall construction costs? So when you're going to the bank and getting, say, development finance, they will automatically put on 5% contingency, whether you like it or not. That's just the buffer that they will put in when they calculate the feasibility of your project. That's what most banks will use, 5% finance, Latrobes and those sorts of characters. So there's that, and you've just got to factor in that will be used in their feasibility. In terms of your project and how it'll affect the costs, if you change your mind a lot or there is not enough detail, you're going to get hit with a ton of variations. Now, why? The builder makes, essentially how the tender process goes is you'll send out to your builder to get a quote. A builder might come back to you with an initial quote. Let's just say, for example, he comes back and says $2 million. Yeah, look, this project, maybe it's a duplex, $2 million. Now, then you go back further with him, and you might get that from a few builders. And then after that stage, you go into, then that builder will start to break down that quote in a little bit more detail. He'll tender it out to his entire team, all his subcontractors, his landscaper, and all those sorts of guys. And they'll come back with a figure for the project, and you'll be able to get to something that's around about or similar to that initial quote. That's how that works. Variations only happen, for example, I'll give you where I see most variations happen. Most variation happens from, again, a lack of just knowledge, or people get caught up, right? They'll start walking through the project and they'll go, I want to move that there, or I want to change that there. I worked with a project manager once that gave me super great advice around this. He'd often say, when we're doing anything regarding a project or a building, one of our developments, he would say, is it your house? No. Can you see it from your house? No. Then why the hell do you give an F? One thing you need to realize as a developer is you're not living there. You don't need to see it. You don't live there. You're building it for a particular person to come in, buy, live in, right? A lot of the changes that come in are from the heart and not the head. Now, don't get me wrong, there might be some changes that come in that are fundamental flaws that you need to change, but majority of the time, I personally think that the changes that come in aren't needed. They are just personal preference. They are just your people's feelings and emotions wanting to change things about how they want it, not how the market is. That comes back to as well the brief. The brief of what you're building and who is it for. Who is the target market you are designing for, right? Number of bedrooms, bathrooms, where you're putting the bathtub, kitchen size, all those things. You should be locking those in at design stage. So there's no real changes. The only other way that changes come in if there's not enough detail. Now, what do we mean by this? The builder, if you don't put it on the plans, the builder will make an assumption as to what you're finishing and what is the type of finish. So for example, stone bench tops. Builder might allow $20,000 for stone bench tops, which when you calculate it might be X amount dollars per square. Now, if you just have on your plans stone bench top, you could mean Calcutta, and the builder could mean an engineered stone that's, very cheap to put in. You might be referencing some sort of marble from Italy. So if you don't put enough detail in there, that is when the builder will come back and you go, oh no, I wanted Calcutta marble. The builder goes, well, the detail wasn't on the plans. I've allowed for the $20,000 worth of stone. You want an upgrade, that's $35,000. Well, I've got to charge you a variation of $15,000. That's how majority of the variations occur, not enough detail. That includes fixtures, finishes. If you want brands, if you want specific spec, if you want a type of cladding, if you want a type of stone, that includes things like geotechnical reports so the builder knows what's underground. That includes on your landscape plans, labeling what needs to be done, labeling if we need a new fence, labeling if we need a letterbox, if we need all those sorts of things. If the builder misses it and it's on the plans and it's been spec'd and it's been asked for, that's the builder's fault. If it's not on the plans, but it's been up here in your head, then it's your fault and you'll need to pay the variations. So your question was, how do variations impact the overall construction costs? They can affect it a lot or a little. It depends how many changes and how much detail you include in the plans. Now, obviously, your first project, you're not going to get it right. You're not going to include everything. Your architect and landscape architect should be helping you out there. But as you go on and the more projects you do, you'll know what to include and have on the plans for that particular builder to allow for. In terms of variations as well, the bank won't typically fund those, so you will need to be able to fund those in cash. The bank will agree on an amount to fund your project. Kind of looks like this. They'll agree on amount. They'll say, this is what they'll fund, right? This part here is interest. This part here is for the land, and this part here is for the build. And they might say, oh, we're going to fund you $2.5 million or something like that. Say $3.5 million if it was a $2 million build. They'll fund you 3.5. So they already have that allocation of what the land is. You'll know that. What the interest in, they'll give you that as well. And an allocated timeline of the project, and then they'll give you a build. So any variations that come over the top, you typically have to address and pay for yourself. I'll give you a variation. Sometimes I'm happy to pay variations. One recent example was bricks. I'm very particular about my bricks and my finishes. Some people just say, yeah, whatever bricks, finish them in. The builder, allows, say, $1.70 a brick, and the brick that I really want is going to be $1.90. 20 cents different. 20 cents difference, times it by a couple of thousand bricks, you might be up for $1,000 or $2,000. That's an example of a variation for me is worth paying. Did I have that on the plans? Yes. However, the type of recycled brick that the builder allowed for probably wasn't my first choice, so I was able to source them elsewhere. That's an example. So how can it affect you? Either a little or a lot, depending on how much detail you have on the plan and how much changes you want to have, and you're likely going to need to fund them yourself. So just keep that in mind before you start doing heaps and heaps of variations. You'll also see as well, when the builder does a tender, this is where you go through the builder's tender and see what they have allowed for and excluded. So have they allowed for example, air conditioning? Have they allowed for split systems? Or, have they allowed for what appliances, what brand of appliances, those sorts of things? That's what you need to dig into the weeds for and have a look at when you're tendering builders too, is to see, okay, what builder's doing what, you know what I mean? And what they are actually including, and then what they're excluding too. Second question, if possible, could you share some ballpark figures that are commonly used in the market? For example, the cost difference per square meter between timber and steel structures, or the additional costs associated with open plan or high ceiling designs compared to standard ones. I believe this kind of information would really help new developers better demystify construction costs. Once again, thank you for your effort and the value you're providing to property investors and aspiring developers. Now, Dave, personally, I think you're getting into the weeds a little bit here. You're trying to go, oh, if I use steel here, it's going to be impossible for you to calculate on a square meter basis, because the size of that span, what is above it, what's next to it, what is it going on top of, all those sorts of things. In terms of finishes and like what you said at the top, I mean, depending on, there's a few different finishes that will affect costs. So you have like your normal, concrete or steel foundations. You have a concrete slab and waffle pod setup, and then you just have a normal concrete slab. They're your three types of foundations, cheapest to most expensive. Now, in majority of markets, you can get away with the middle one. They're not going to know as well on the ground floor slab which one it is. That is one thing. I think the next and the probably only thing you have to think about if you're building 2 stories is whether or not that second level is going to be a concrete floor finish. Why is that important? Because the market will tell you if you need that or not. Typically, in sort of that sub $1.5 million finished product mark, you probably don't need it. It's only when you get up into the very expensive markets where people are paying 2, 3, 4, 5 million, do they expect that concrete slab. With steel versus timber steel, timber frames, all those sorts of things, it's kind of too hard to calculate. What I would encourage you to do instead is try to develop a box rate. Builders hate square meter rates because some builders include just the GFA, some builders include the alfresco, some builders include GFA and alfresco, some builders include GFA, alfresco and garage, some builders include GFA and garage. So it's hard to give square meter rates because of who allows for what there. But typically in Australia, I mean, your construction prices are about $2,250 to $3,000 a square meter for like typical standard, and then luxury can go from 3,000 fucking all the way up to 10 grand like a square meter. Like, it's ridiculous. And those things are selling for like $100,000 a square meter. So it's pretty hard, depends what you're selling. But what I would do, for example, if you've got a certain market that you're looking in, right? And let's just say it's a duplex market. You want to start to establish and build up essentially kind of like research of what is everyone else building? What are they building? What's the finished product? What are the specs? What are the finishes? All those sorts of things, right? And then you're going to start to, then you talk to builders. Then you can go through and see what they're putting on then you can go through online and also check what the LSL and all those sorts of things are for costs. And then when you're talking to builders, you're going to start to establish, and I've done a few other videos on how you can work out costs, but you're going to start to talk to builders, and then you're going to start to build up this brief, and you're going to be like, okay, in this area, duplexes, they can be concrete slab, they can be lightweight timber up from that, and the finishes need to be X, Y, Z. That's what we can sort of get away with. And then you want to start to trying to detail and get down to what does that box rate cost. It could be, as I said before, you go, okay, well, this type of duplex or this site is $1 million per side, rather than steel, timber, and all that kind of stuff. In this market, in this area that I'm looking at, the product is going to be a $2 million build. So that way, when I have my FISO, I'm putting in bang, $2 million build. You know, I've spoken with architects, I've spoken with builders, I've spoken with real estate agents, I've checked online, depending on the type of finish, what is it sort of boiled down to be a square meter rate? Is there a typical or a rough square meter rate that you can get from looking at enough of these? You know what I mean? So that's the way I'd sort of work it out. And then I go, okay, well, I know it's a million build each side. Now that would be very expensive. That might be also with a basement or not. But then you start to build up, okay, I know it's 1 mil. I know those, for example, 200. From there, then you go, okay, well, I know they're building them for 250 square meters a side. I know to allow $4,000 a square meter, which isn't a overly expensive price. That's sort of luxury duplex territory. So that's how I would do it. Then obviously, depending on the site, can I go above that? Does the market want above that? Does the market want below that? Real estate agents and your sold prices are going to be able to tell you that. So I know that obviously, the site's a bit tighter. I need to come back and do 200 a side, which equals, 200 a side, which equals, and if I use this sort of math, okay, 4,000 a square meter, okay, then I know it's going to be 800K a side. Does that start to make sense? That's how you start to work it out. Then I go, okay, or the big ones are selling a little bit more expensive, and then you start to sort of get to know the maths and the numbers around who's building what are they selling for, what are the big ones selling for, what are the little ones selling for, and then you're trying to identify potentially opportunities that maybe the ones that are 50 square meters smaller, that are actually a lot cheaper to build, are only selling, like, look at this, 800 plus 800, right? Let's just say that's 1.6. And then you've got these ones are selling for 2 mil. These ones are built for 2 mil. But the sale price, they could be, 3 mil a side. But these ones could be 2.9 a side. So you go, okay, 100 grand cheaper, but I'm actually saving 200 grand on build. And then you sort of identify an opportunity around build price. But I would work on sort of a box rate of what you're trying to get to, what your end product's trying to get to. Then from there, you can start to say, okay, well, typically if it's X amount, this is what it's costing them to build. You're talking to builders, you're talking to architects as well. And then also you're establishing a brief so that when you start to do plans and start to do your own projects, you can put all the detail on there. This is what I want. This is the type of finish. I want a concrete slab. I want lightweight above. I want, Miele appliances. I want, Parisi tapware. You can be very specific with all that stuff. So there's no surprises when the builder quotes, you're getting exactly what you paid for. So Davo, mate, I hope that worked out. I hope that answered your question. As always, guys, if you found any value in this, please, I would appreciate it if you subscribed. Dave, I hope this answers your question, both of them. I appreciate you watching, and it's the channel of truth, trust, and transparency, baby. Guys, I will make a quick announcement. If you're interested in development, I've got a very, very exciting segment starting soon. So keep an eye out for that one if you're interested in development and sites and those sorts of things. So look, appreciate it as always, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.